Okay, welcome to this listening lesson. This is from book number 16, test number 2, but the first part of test number 2. If you want to watch the subsequent videos, the more difficult videos as we go along, then please look for them at the end of this video. You'll see all the links to those videos. Okay, so this one is a listening lesson, remember, so that means that we will be stopping. We will be discussing new vocabulary. We will be discussing some grammar sometimes. And also perhaps talking about the techniques you can use. So if you want to do a real past paper, then I suggest that you actually go and watch or at least download this book or buy the book from Amazon.com is one place you can get it, and then do the test yourself under exam conditions. But here, obviously, this is a listening lesson, so we will be stopping and starting, etc., etc. Okay, so we'll start with the audio, and let's get that started, and you'll hear what they say at the beginning.
Test 2. This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to part 1.
Okay, before we carry on, just if you listened carefully to that, he said the test is in 4 parts. So we're looking at part number 1 here. There will be 3 more parts in the next set of videos, and that you will have 10 minutes at the end of the video. At the end of the exam to transfer your answers from this question paper here onto a specific answer sheet, and that specific answer sheet I will give you an example of what it looks like now. Actually, I'll put it up here. So it looks like that, and that answer sheet must be filled in. Do not forget to fill that in, because just because you put the answers onto this page does not mean that you have completed the answer sheet. Remember, this answer sheet is also necessary in the reading exam too. Okay, let's carry on.
Part 1. You will hear a woman phoning a company that converts old photographs to digital format.
Okay, very important to listen to those sort of things to give you an idea of where you are in the imaginary world of an exam, where you are and who you're listening to. So this is very typical for part 1 of the exam, the listening exam, in that it's 2 people talking, usually over the telephone. And you'll notice here that it is part of a table. Okay, so you're filling in a table here, which means that you're not required to do much more than a single word and or a number. Okay, and it's converting. So this is maybe a new word for you. To convert is to change the format. So original format is normal paper, photographs, and converting it into a digital format. Okay, and so that's the name of the company. It's called Picture Rep, and she's phoning this company called Picture Rep, probably to ask a few questions. Okay, let's listen a bit more.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 3.
Okay, so 1 to 3, that's only these first few here. So you're very quickly going through this. If you are a strong candidate, if you're already very strong in English, you'll find yourself probably going beyond that, and you might even be able to see the whole lot. You might get to the whole lot before they ask you to. But very quickly, if we've got 1 to 3, let's have a look. How much time do they have there? That looks like it's only about 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds up there if we look carefully. So let's see, out of interest. Not be in or cost. Okay, that's costs, and something is required, probably a signature.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 3.
Okay, so you saw that was about 10 to 15 seconds. I wasn't really counting because I was concentrating here. But, and concentrating, maybe it's a new word for you, so I think it's worth looking at. Because I was concentrating, I didn't really notice, but it's around 10 seconds. Okay, and this first part is supposed to be pretty easy. The first three are supposed to be really easy. So you're listening just for the words that you hear in the text. So let's do that now.
Hello, Picture Rep. Can I help you?
Oh, hi. I saw your advertisement about copying pictures to disk, and I'd like a bit more information about what you do.
Sure. What would you like to know?
Well, I've got a box full of old family photos that's been up in the attic for years. Some of them must be 50 or 60 years old, and I'd like to get them converted to digital format.
Sure, we can do that for you.
Right. And what about size? The photos are all sorts of sizes. Are there any restrictions?
Well, the maximum size of photo we can do with our normal service is 30 centimetres, and each picture must be at least 4 centimetres. That's the minimum we can cope with.
Well, that should be fine. And some of them are in a frame. Should I take them out before I send them?
It's the minimum we can cope with. The minimum we can cope with. Maybe a new word for you. I'm going to add that up here in the corner. And she said some of them are in a frame. So some photos, they are not just the paper, but they come with a piece of wood or plastic or metal sometimes, frame that goes around it. And that's a frame, okay? Now, the photos must not be in. Now, what do you think? What do you think the answer is? Let's listen.
Yes, please. We can't copy them otherwise.
Okay, so they must not be in a frame, otherwise we can't copy them. So she needs to take them out. If we go back just a second, you'll hear her say, should I take them out?
And some of them are in a frame. Should I take them out before I send them?
Yes, please. We can't copy them otherwise. And also the photos must all be separate. They mustn't be stuck into an album.
Okay, and they mustn't be stuck into an album. And an album, by the way, is a book that's full of photos. Okay, in case you didn't know that. It's quite an international word now, so it should be clear. There's digital albums like Google Photos. There's lots of digital albums. Okay, and did you notice I started reading over here because I know that I'm going to listen for a number, and my important thing is to start preparing for what's coming next. So I started listening to this already. Or sorry, preparing for this already.
Okay, that's not a problem. So, can you give me an idea of how much this will cost? I've got about 360 photos, I think.
We charge £195 for 300 to 400 photos for the basic service.
Okay, and does that include the disc?
Yes, one disc, but you can get...
Okay, including one disc. Okay, and he said between anything between 300 and 400 photos comes to 195. And obviously you need to look a little bit of maths. Obviously it's not difficult, but you should see that 360 fits in between that range. It's called a range, and therefore £195. The pound symbol is already there. Now, what's going to happen if you put the pound sign again? I've heard some conflicting responses to this from people who know that that's the pound symbol, and they put it twice. Some people say you would get it marked wrong because you're not looking carefully that it's already written. It would be a spelling mistake. However, I have heard some examiners say that would be accepted, but I don't want to take that risk. If you see the symbol, do not repeat the symbol. Just put the number. And it's almost always going to be the case that they don't ask you to give these strange symbols. So the euro, for example, sign, the pound sign, the dollar sign. It's very seldom that they're requesting you to put those sort of things in. It's usually given to you in these situations. Okay, so just put the number. Okay.
It's extra ones for £5 each.
That's good. So, do I need to pay when I send you the photos?
No, we won't need anything until we've actually copied the pictures. Then we'll let you know how much it is, and once we've received the payment, we'll send the parcel off to you.
Right.
Once we've received the payment, then it will be sent to you. So then, they use the word then it will be sent. So you need to know that before is the time previous to that. So we need not signature, but payment. Payment is required. So you need to make the payment first. You don't get the receipt. You don't receive the digital photos and then run away without paying. Could happen. Okay. And notice the spelling, payment, like that. Okay, now we're ready to go on to the next. So let's listen.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 4 to 10.
Okay, so all of that basically, 4 to 10. And we can see that was about 10 seconds there, maybe 15. This looks like it's about 20 seconds or maybe 30. Okay, let's listen. The same in a folder with the name. Okay, we don't know what that is. The contrast can be improved. Scanned by what? So very fragile, very easily broken or damaged. Let's use the word damaged, it's better.
Now listen and answer questions 4 to 10.
Object.
Is there anything else you'd like to ask about our services?
Yes, I've roughly sorted out the photos into groups according to what they're about. So, can you keep them in those groups when you copy them?
Sure, we'll save each group in a different folder on the disk, and if you like, you can suggest a name for each folder.
So, I could have one called grandparents, for instance.
Exactly.
Do you do anything besides scan the photos? Like, can you make any improvements?
Yes, in the standard service, each photo is checked, and we can sometimes touch up the colour a bit or improve the contrast. That can make a big difference.
Okay, and some of the photos are actually quite fragile. They won't get damaged in the process, will they?
No, if any look particularly fragile, we'd do them by hand. We do realise how precious these old photos can be.
Sure.
And
Okay, so they'll do it by hand. That means it sounds like most photos are done by some sort of machine. And if something's done by hand, that means manually. It's another word to say manually. Some people prefer to say that. And that means using their hands. So they'll maybe special gloves or something, and they'll put it onto the scanner and they'll scan the photos manually or by hand. Notice this, my program that I'm using here is an American program. If you're in America, of course, the word color is spelled without a U. Okay, that's also perfectly acceptable. So those are fine. And I forgot to underline this, but for example, EG is how we write for example in English when we're making it shorter. So photos can be placed in a folder, for example, with the name grandparents, because she said, for example, I've got a folder that's got it's called grandparents. Would you be able to put those images into that folder? And he said yes. Okay. So color and contrast and easily damaged or fragile photos will be done manually. Okay, let's listen for the next 4.
another thing is we can make changes to a photo if you want. So if you want to remove an object from a photo or maybe alter the background, we can do that.
Really? I might be interested in that. I'll have a look through the photos and see. Oh, and talking of fixing photos, I've got a few that aren't properly in focus. Can you do anything to make that better?
No, I'm afraid that's one thing we can't do.
Okay.
Any other?
Okay, so in focus, also a phrase that it's worth knowing. So a photo that is out of focus, that's the opposite. Out of focus. It means it's blurry. Excuse me. And the opposite of blurry is sharp. Okay, so we've got sharp photos, perfect, very good. Blurry, you can't see the details. Out of focus, in focus. Excuse me. Okay. And it's possible to change the background, he said, for this extra fee, or remove an object that's in the photo. Usually it's possible, but if it's out of focus, that's very difficult. I mean, nowadays AI can do some help in that sort of way, but not very well. Okay.
Other information I can give you?
Oh, how long will it all take?
We aim to get the copying done in 10 days.
Fine. Right, well, I'll get the photos packed up in a box and post them off to you.
Right. If you've got a strong cardboard box, that's best. We've found that plastic ones sometimes break in the post.
Okay. Right, thanks for your help. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 1.
Okay, so that's obviously, as you can hear, he said it's the end of part 1. You have half a minute to go and check your answers. If you're a strong student and you know you're pretty happy with that, I wouldn't spend time looking at that. I would go straight into part 2 and start reading the questions in part 2, because part 2 obviously gets harder than part 1, and then 3, and by the time you get to part 4, that's particularly difficult. So always do that. If you find that you're quite confident with what you wrote down, or you might be you don't know what the word is, for example, in number 4, do not get frustrated with yourself and say, okay, I can't believe I don't know what question number 4 was. How am I, this is the most easy part of the exam, and yet I don't know what 4 was. It's too late. You're not going to hear it again. So there's no point getting upset about it. Much better to just live in the moment, in the very second that you're in, and go straight to part 2 and start focusing on that. Because if you're confident with everything else, that's one small point that you didn't quite make, and it doesn't matter. Go to part 2, because if you start getting frustrated with yourself at this stage, you're going to have problems with part 2, then part 3, and then finally part 4, which is most difficult. It's going to make you really stressed. So just focus on the moment. If you missed a question, don't worry. Focus on the next part, in those 30 seconds they give you. Okay, and then of course they'll give you some more time as well. So they'll say, now you have some time to look at questions, so questions 11 to 14, for example. So you'll also have that time as well, but the more time you have to focus on the questions there, the better it will be for you. Okay, if you have any questions, comments down below, but I think that's self-explanatory, and thanks for watching.